All right, in the last section, we're going to talk about, well, actually, there's two sections, but they're going to be both quick sections. We're going to talk about cultural appropriation. So this has something to do with racial biases as well, but also has a lot more to do just about understanding how our cultures are created and how they co-opt certain things and how they demonize certain things for marginalized groups, but then for white groups, um, we appropriate it. So this is a great quote by Culture Vulture. If you don't understand the cultural appropriation, imagine working on a project and getting an F, and then somebody copies you and gets an A and credit for your work. So that, and then they show the sign of so a lot, women who wear, braid their hair like that, black women, they'll get a lot of crap. They can get crap from employers. They can get, discrimination. But then when white women do it, it's like trendy and cool, so that's one form of cultural appropriation. So it's important to understand the difference between cultural appropriation and cultural exchange, because one is bad and one is actually a really good thing that we should do more of. So cultural appropriation is when a dominant group uses a marginalized group's cultural symbols for self-expression, costume, a mascot. It's an exercise in privilege, and it's not honoring the culture. Jerome Ujarwin wrote, cultural appropriation is itself a real issue because it demonstrates the imbalance of power that still remains between cultures that have been colonized and ex-colonizers. So I think a lot of this kind of, is parallel to like these ideas of reverse racism. Is like, you can't have reverse racism because the institutions and the histories of what created racism in the first place was all anti-black. So you can't just like kind of flip it. And that's kind of the same. Like, you can't, you had a European colonization that's dominated all these cultures, and now they're using these cultures. I mean, many times, especially we talked about native mascots, and they created native mascots at the same time they were like outlawing native people from even being able to speak their language and practice their culture. So it is a form of colonialization. It is a form of kind of dominating a culture for the benefit of the dominant culture or for the white culture. And on the other end of that, you have cultural exchange. And this is actually the good, version of what you can do. But this is something, it's really important. You need to be invited for this. This isn't something like you could just, grab someone's like, a cultural dress and start wearing it like normally. Like, this is like if someone invites you to, someone from a different culture invites you to a wedding, and then they provide you, with like, their cultural attire, and they invite you to participate in their culture, and that's great. We need more of that. That's a great way to kind of build diversity and understanding, and kind of reduce like xenophobia and things like that. But then, if you take that warp and suddenly, without anyone make it part of your everyday clothes, and like that gets into like more of cultural appropriation. So cultural exchange is being invited to embrace something. And there's a mutual understanding. There's a level of respect, and that's important to understand. And I think that sometimes we kind of mix these lines as well. But the biggest one is just it needs to be mutual understanding, and it needs to be like kind of some kind of invitation as well. So I'm gonna play a quick video on MTV Decoded 7 Myths About Cultural Appropriation.
They say imitation is the highest form of flattery. But what happens when it's not so flattering? The more you learn about the world and the people in it, you quickly realize just how beautiful and diverse it is. So where's the line between cultural exchange, appreciation, and appropriation? Why does it even matter? Here are 7 myths about cultural appropriation debunked. You're just looking for something to be offended by. It's just clothing, hairstyles, decorations, whatever. Don't you have something better to worry about? Okay, first off, it's possible to care about more than one issue at a time. The main problem with cultural appropriation comes from dominant groups borrowing from marginalized groups who face oppression or have been stigmatized for their cultural practices throughout history. Like cornrows. I mean, anyone can wear their hair in cornrows, but Black people still face stigmas for wearing them, along with perfectly natural hairstyles like braids and locks. There are even companies and schools that prohibit these natural hairstyles. People have actually been fired for wearing braids. Meanwhile, fashion models and celebs like Kylie Jenner get praised for wearing cornrows. And that's the main point. One group is being penalized by institutions for wearing natural hairstyles, while the other is called edgy and stylish for doing the exact same thing. I'm doing it because I think it's beautiful and exotic. I'm just showing appreciation for the culture. Look, it's great that you find another group's culture beautiful, but in order to show you truly love it, you need to have respect and understanding. Take, for example, tribal tattoos. The Maori of New Zealand have facial tattoos with deep family meaning and cultural significance. But fashion designer Jean-Paul Gaultier used the tattoos in ads to sell sunglasses. Now, that's a perfect example of cultural appropriation. No matter how much the designer liked the look, he stripped the tattoo of all of its cultural meaning just to sell a product. Now, if you really appreciate something, you should respect it instead of assuming you can use it however you want. Well, I don't find it offensive, and I asked someone from that culture, and they said it was okay. Well, it's not your culture that's being disrespected, so sure, you don't find it offensive. And if you know someone from that background who doesn't mind your tattoo, costume, or whatever, that's cool. But remember that one person doesn't speak for all members of that community. Whatever, fashion, art, film, music always borrows from other sources. Plus, it doesn't hurt anyone. Sure, cultural exchange has been going on since the beginning of time. But exchange is mutual. It needs to be done respectfully. A couple years ago, Katy Perry did a geisha-themed performance with Japanese women dancing in the background. Not only was it super stereotypical, her outfit wasn't even from the right country. The Japanese American Citizens League said it best. The thoughtless costuming and dance routines by Katy Perry played carelessly with stereotypes in an attempt to create a Japanese aesthetic. And that kind of crushes the idea that appropriation is harmless. You're just trying to tell everyone what to think. Hello, thought police! Have you ever heard of the First Amendment? Nobody's telling you what to think, wear, or say. Marginalized people can't stop you from doing your thing, even if they wanted to. But if you think you have the right to use any cultural tradition just cause, that's where you get into oppressive territory. And if you genuinely don't care if someone is hurt by your appropriation, that's just crappy. So because I'm white, I'm automatically racist. And if I wear this clothing, I'm even more racist. This isn't about beating up on white people. Anyone can appropriate elements of marginalized cultures. Heck, Pharrell even made the mistake of wearing a Native American headdress on the cover of Elle magazine. And after getting some much-deserved flack, he actually issued an apology. If Chinese people wear blue jeans, aren't they appropriating my culture? Or what about black girls wearing blonde weaves? Or how about speaking English? Okay, this is a tough one. Assimilation and appropriation aren't the same thing. Marginalized people conforming to standards set by dominant, or in this case, Western cultures, is often a means of survival. When your cultural heritage is looked down on, often people change or hide things about themselves in order to be accepted by majority culture. For example, there are schools where students have been punished or even suspended for speaking Spanish or indigenous languages. So there are people who are literally being forced to assimilate or else. So it's not really a fair comparison. So you're saying I should never enjoy another culture? That's not fair. Not at all. For example, say you're invited to an Indian wedding and you're not Indian. Wearing a traditional sari or getting henna would be a great example of cultural exchange. You're being invited to participate and enjoy the culture instead of just picking and choosing parts of it for yourself. You can also travel, take cooking classes, read books, listen to music, and visit museums if you really want to learn about and enjoy other cultures. Here's the thing. Cultural appropriation is about a privileged group misrepresenting and disrespecting marginalized cultures. The originators rarely get credit, but always deal with the consequences. The goal isn't to shame you out of wearing or enjoying certain things, but listening to the people from the culture you're interested in shows you have a genuine love, respect, and understanding for something that's not your own. So what are some misconceptions you've heard about cultural appropriation? Or maybe you had some misunderstandings yourself. Tell us.
All right. So there's a couple. We don't need to dwell too much on this, but a couple examples of cultural appropriation that's definitely not appropriate. There's some really great guides on how to not be a jerk during the wedding, during Halloween. And I mean, like, I laugh at this, but I mean, I've definitely, looking back, I feel shame for some of the costumes that I've did, and I definitely had people call me out, and I appreciate that because I even at the time I probably wasn't so super appreciative, but I feel like I've learned a lot from that. So I mean, so I'm not trying to act like this is, I'm better in this, but this is something that we're not taught this in normal school. So this is something that we all need to kind of do. So if you're a little concerned about your outfit and you're a little worried that it may be offensive, definitely check out, go, check out these guidelines. That will definitely help you out. And then last thing, co-oping experiences. So this is another form. It's kind of like a cultural appropriation, but I see this a lot. Where someone I've seen somebody who's like teaching some permaculture class, and so he like their flyer is a bunch of like migrant workers working some crazy farm, and then he's like, okay, now learn permaculture, so he's like co-opting the experiences that these marginalized people are experiencing to kind of push some class that he's personally profiting from. Whereas clickbait, I see this a lot, like a lot of people on Twitter or Instagram will highlight some cause but won't have any information, but it'll highlight the fact that we just need to talk more and all this stuff. And so we want to be careful, not to kind of co-opt people's experiences for our own personal gain. And if you are going to bring attention to their experiences, honor their intentions, and promote their voices, and teach people how to actually directly help them and not try to figure out a way to help yourself.